Good evening, everybody. This is Steve Hodgson at Modern Asset Management here with Nick Curry.
Hello,
And
everybody.
hey, Nick. And we're doing a recording tonight, and then we'll have some conversation. The topic we chose is counterparty risk. The purchasing of assets, mortgages, or anything else. Also, you have to consider who's the people that are in the middle, who's your seller. We've had lots of experience, both good and bad, and we thought we'd share some of the things that we've learned along the way. So this is where we're going to start.
Someone was thinking earlier, Steve. It's almost like the daily habits that we have as just consumers. We go to the same grocery store because we know that we're going to get a certain quality or certain product. There's a certain level of safety in just knowing things are repeatable and trustworthy. So there's counterparty risk in everyday life if you really think about it.
And so many of the folks that are part of this group are just learning their way in notes or in real estate, and they've bought one, two, maybe a handful, have only done one or two transactions, and if you don't know the neighborhood, you can walk into the wrong store, and I've done that, and we continue to learn. So I think you and I both come out of the credit card and debt collection space, which in some ways is more structured, I think, than the world of selling individual mortgages or contracts for deed. There's a lot more restrictions. There's some pretty significant national associations that provide a level of accreditation, and
That's a good point.
And you were buying direct from major banks and loans. That the loan portfolio that I always talk about is the one that I bought, which was fourth hand. It was bought from a hedge fund that I didn't even know existed, except I was guided there by a broker.
And that broker, you made the distinction earlier, telling that story about buying through the broker or buying with the broker being paid on the side as a service. Talk about the difference in that, and how someone can identify who they're buying from.
And when I was really I wanted to make sure that my company name was untitled for all of these, and so when we bought this pool, I found somebody who was compatible with my view and my checklist, and we made sure that the notes that we purchased were recorded, or didn't go through the hands of the broker. The broker facilitated the transaction. They were never on title. I see a lot of new folks that are looking for passive income get involved in what's affectionately called a joint venture, where a note will be purchased, and the entity, the broker, or the servicer, the person who's going to do the work, and the investor who put up all the money are both listed on title. And I didn't think me immediately turning over half of my investment to somebody else was what I wanted to do. So I didn't want to buy from a fund, although I've bought many things from funds, and I've been a passive investor in apartments and mobile home parks and REITs and that kind of thing. I wanted, like, I was going to the used car lot of mortgages, and I was going to pick my cars and drive them home myself. So
yeah, they weren't going to retain ownership of half the car, right, after you drove it off the lot.
Yeah. So I wound up working with Dion DePauli out of Indiana, and Dion and I now have become friends after 3+ years of doing this, and I found him through actually I sourced him through Bigger Pockets. Dion had a significant presence on the message boards at Bigger Pockets, and he was exceptionally pessimistic, and he was also very regulatory, legal focused. There was not a lot of high flying. Well, you could do this, you could do that. Just don't, just hope the government doesn't find out. So in my first foray into switching from buying and selling unsecured loans and payday loans and car title and car loans, I wanted somebody to guide me. So I found the most, in my mind, I found the most pessimistic guy out there. And our arrangement was strictly a fee for service arrangement, and it worked fine for everybody. But we've been, he and I sat in Condor's office in Orange County and talked with all of their sellers there, and we've talked to Condor and Granite and other places, and we wound up only buying a couple of assets from those folks. Most we bought through a direct connection that he had, some folks that he knew from back in the old days, back at the beginning of his career. So it was, the friend of a friend thing, maybe, but it was, and I said it worked okay because we were pretty skeptical coming in. You and I both have been in a world that was that for a while had no barrier to entry. If you had a cell phone, you could call yourself a broker. And that's what I see in some of the mortgage space. I see people coming in brand new, calling themselves note workout experts with nowhere near the 30 years of collection experience that I have.
I would encourage them to be pessimistic on their first trade, only from the mindset that they're going to do their due diligence in and out until they completely understand the asset that they're buying. Would that be true? Just go in with what's the worst case scenario, and if this is your first note that you're buying.
What if everything blows up? What if it's like a couple of the ones that we've had, but I saw a person buy 3 small balance notes, about $7,000 or $8,000 a piece, from one of the large vendors, one of the large resellers, and one of the houses was tagged for bulldozing. Another one was in such a rural area that there was no market for it. And the third was shuttered, was boarded up in Cleveland, in a block that was just, there was nothing to do with any of them, and that's unconscionable for the seller who's I would call them a multi-million-dollar enterprise to put that sort of stuff out to a retail investor who was using their IRA and looking for long-term passive income.
It's amazing they would take that kind of reputational risk as well.
Right. And so reputation. There's lots of Facebook groups where you can poke around and see what people are thinking. We all go to conventions, and those sellers are there with booths, and you're always talking to salespeople, so you never get to hear bad news, but you get to meet people and you get to ask what their experiences are, and see who fits what you want to do. But it's we're taught through any of the training guru folks that are out there that it's all about asset evaluation and understanding equity, and is your broker price opinion correct, and all of that stuff. And we've got to put the same kind of scrutiny to the person who's in the middle, or the person we're buying from. So we were gonna take a look at us. I think we were gonna try to Google us and see what we saw. So there's some pretty key things. Do we have a registered? Does the person you're dealing with have a registered phone number, or are they working just from their cell phone? I spend an awful lot of time on my cell phone, but there's an office, and there's people, and there's a number, and and there's a real place. we've got a couple of licenses. The Department of Business Oversight, which is the old Department of Corporations here in California. We've got a license that hangs on the wall outside of my little office here. We're audited twice a year. I think one of the tests that probably wouldn't be bad is does the person on the other side of the trade have the ability to give you fresh credit reports? The barrier to entry to being able to get access to credit bureaus has increased a lot over the years. You should if you're going to be actively in the mortgage game, you should be learning how to use services like Pacer for bankruptcies. You should certainly know some of the basic skip tracing rules. You should maybe have a Skip Genie account. Or would be one of the things. I'd take my business card and I would put the address in Google Maps and I'd look at the building. I've seen more than you'd think that the business address and the business card is a mailboxes, etc., or a UPS store. And so if you got somebody doing business out of a UPS store using his cell phone, how are you going to find him when things go bad?
That could. Why not use his home address if it's just to him, right? Or if it's just to her, it's an individual. They are trying to hide behind something. I would say if they're using a post office box.
And again, not to. Well, I'm going to speak out of both sides of my mouth. Dion was operating out of a one-person office. Maybe you think he was renting space in a realtor's office, who is now a broker for. When we got together, so there was nothing to tie him to. I didn't have this. I could go get my hands around it, but at that point we had built a relationship. We had done enough due diligence work together, and there was no risk in him anymore because I purchased the loans directly. There wasn't a joint venture. I've often, and I am, we've done an episode on this. I get chasing promised yields of 20%, and off goes my money, and then I realize that we didn't really have any control over this deal. The spec build we did. We had to go and force a foreclosure to get the builder to capitulate, to take care of his investors. There was a million.
Watch that in the YouTube library if you want that full story. That's a great one.
Go look up Linda Flora. That was, we chased down $1.5 million for a group of investors that had no. They all believe the same thing I did. Put the money in, put 100,000 in, 120 will come out. Well, we put 100 in and we pulled 100 out. And we're still working on the rest, but we have to keep reminding me of that lesson, because I like the promise of success.
Well, and going back to what you said about pulling resources together, especially in the note business, it can differ from county to county and what the asset is on whether or not I can pull a title report. And does the first-time note buyer have access to the resources to verify that this person actually has recorded title to this property and that there's no other liens, and the importance of that.
Yeah, and what kind of title are you buying? Are you buying a quick claim deed? Are you buying a special warranty deed? Are you buying something that's actually a general warranty deed that's fully insured all the way back? When was the last time there was lender's insurance? All those things, and particularly, excuse me, in CFDs and contracts for deed, I bought a note from Harbor that the chain of title was incomplete because Harbor had traded the loan in and out themselves and never recorded the transactions. And there was an owner in the middle that had never been recorded, who had equitable interest in the property, and I didn't know it until after the note after I tried to record to get a new warranty deed for the new owner. So it's and that was an instance where I was working with another seller in the market, and he didn't know. He didn't know that the chain of title wasn't perfect, and we didn't, between the two of us, we didn't know enough to how to figure it out. And I got taught to well, you'd hate to see me do this. I took the electronic file, I printed out all the pages, and I spread them out in consecutive order on the conference room table. And then I sat down and read them all. So so there's another thing. It's what collateral are you getting, right? What's the promise of collateral? I know in the seconds market and the delinquent and in the non-performing market, there can be a drag on collateral getting to you, and you don't own anything until it's recorded, and you don't want to own something until you've seen all the collateral. I've seen with Condor, we had a trade where we were buying a small group of accounts, and at the end they pulled one out and tried to put in another. Like property, on the surface, all looked the same, but it was in a state with very restrictive laws about. It was in northeast state, it was Massachusetts, and I didn't want to go learn how to dance around in Massachusetts. As I was buying an Ohio asset because I had other Ohio assets, and so that's another point. So there's the people at the trade desks are there to make trades and make commission, and they want you to come back and buy again, but they also sell a lot of one-offs, knowing that people are going to buy one, it's going to go bad, they're going to get discouraged, and they're going to move on to some other type of investment. They're going to go trade Bitcoin or gold bullion or whatever. I think we could probably make a business buying other people's mistakes and trying to fix them. But we've got other stuff to do.
And just because they have title recorded doesn't mean it's recorded properly as well. So right. You said the state examples, every state is different, and then even on the county level. So like just because it's recorded, knowing what to look for and really specializing in this area or this state to avoid getting yourself into a bad situation.
There's blighted areas that have very restrictive rules. That you have to bring a house back up to code once you take possession of it, or you can't resell it. We ran into that in Cleveland. That my seller, if my seller was my seller partner, would have been aware, and we would have budgeted for it. And so I was thinking, there's where do you go? I'm gonna pull this up. This is a seller survey that we used, and it's the same as you used on the trading of credit cards and that sort of thing.
So quick questionnaire, to use another terminology, or it's you're filling out the profile, I guess would be another word.
Yeah. You're trying to create a due diligence path for the seller, mm-hmm. and the seller and the broker, and nobody that I've sold loans to has ever asked me any of the questions that are in here. Now that I'm thinking about it,
I was actually going to ask, do you find these are by default provided in the note space?
No,
or
they don't exist?
Surprising.
Well, I've only done, what have I done? The 33 trades. So what do I do? And I guess we should probably add this in here. We are not experts. We're only talking about our own experience. We're not giving legal or accounting advice, etc.
The disclosure.
Yeah. It's just, I've bought stuff from people that I thought were honest and they weren't. And not just in the mortgage note space, certainly in the unsecured space. It's how it's structured. You're structured if you're buying from a broker, you want to know the transactions all the way through. You want to know it went from who to who to who, and that he's not hiding $5,000 per loan in there or something. You want to know. So it goes through stuff like, are you the originator? We're never going to find anybody that's originator unless you're buying seller finance loans, which are what we've moved on to is primarily seller finance. Like chain of title. We were asking what type of loans were in the portfolio. You want to know if they're subprime, if they're non-QM.
Going back to the seller finance as well on those first few questions, I think it's really important if you're buying not something that someone else has owned. Back to the used car example, if someone else has driven it before and put some miles on it, it drives, right? So in a note that was created via seller finance, no one else has owned it before. It could have been something that they bought at an extremely low basis, and they're offering to sell it to you maybe double what they paid for it and finance you. And it sounds like a great deal. Maybe they got a great deal on it, but they don't know the asset also, and there could be gaps there. So be careful in seller finance as well. And I'd say that's especially important on the origination or the credit criteria and the selection criteria and how it was originated and what were the standards. And if you get vague answers, beware and walk away.
Right. Just because the homeowner paid $50,000 for the house doesn't mean the house is worth $50,000.
Yep.
If it was an Ocwen loan, it's probably worth 10. So which is why Ocwen changed their name recently and is now trying to be reborn as Good Guys. So we ask, we're asking things like, how long it's worked, where it's been, who were the prior servicers, is there credit reporting, have settlement offers been made, have you offered cash for keys, have you, what's all the things that you've done from years of operating collection agencies where there were first placements and second placements and third placements. From a collector point of view, I always wanted to know what the agency before me did. If they were a smile and dial robocall shop, well, I wasn't going to go put the put the accounts on my dialer. But if they were a legal shop where they were suing all the qualified people to sue, well, then I would put it on the dialer because I knew that they didn't do that. So knowing what the work was done before, and there were some attorneys that I would never follow because I knew that they got everything that was there to get, and there may be some people in this space that are the same way. So we ask questions. We even ask questions in unsecured loans. What kind of documentation was available? We asked in unsecured loans, did the sale balance include charged off interest? We've talked before, and everybody reminds people to buy on unpaid principal balance. Will there be charges for documentation? Have accounts been looked at for bankruptcies? And this even goes down to people have been given a 1099-C, so this covered other stuff. But
on your item regarding prior servicing entities, Steve, I think it's important to know if you are especially looking for a passive investment, where was the note serviced, or where is it being serviced right now prior to my purchase, assuming that servicing isn't just in ether, hasn't been released. Servicing release usually happens post-close. So, if you want a passive investment, can you can you just keep servicing in place and keep servicing retained where it's at and just continue to receive distributions? If so, what's your expense? What's your cost? Are you looking for a 12% yield and you're going to be paying out 2 of that in expense to your servicer? But it's passive. You don't have to collect the payments yourself.
So we've got mortgages primarily at Security National, who on the face of things is very expensive. They're $30, $65 if delinquent. I'm paying $75. We're paying $75 for bankruptcy handling. And so we're paying $75 a month for bankruptcy handling, getting a $300 monthly bankruptcy payment. Well, we're not making 12% on that money. I've got some loans at FCI, and FCI has got its good and bads. FCI is half the price of Security National. We've got some accounts that we manage in-house. Some of our seller finance loans, I've just kept them because I've got no intention of letting them go. But we also, I've got one with Quest. I've got one of my retirement loans at Quest, and they're strictly a financial repository. They don't do anything other than take the check and put it in my account. So there's all manner of levels that you can do that, and knowing, so I would think if somebody was buying a non-performing loan from Security National, you should expect that all the standard legal performing stuff was done. They push, they make collection calls, they send attorney letters, they work to the account. Whereas if something was at FCI, I think that it got light, cursory attention.
In the case of both of those, even if I, John Smith, wanted to retain my own servicing for, say, a small non-qualified mortgage portfolio that I bought from a broker, this could be something I could, going to either of those sources or even a small person, give me all your notes, give me all your history, give me all your activity. That should be something they should be able to produce.
And if you're buying in 1, 2, 5, 10, you want to see that ahead of time, and that's you want to see what was done. And Security National, we bought accounts they were at State Bridge, and we moved them to Security National, and we had accounts leave Security National and go on to other folks. And the chain of title is intact, and the chain of information, you can easily piece together all that. Changing servicers always gives the borrower a free month, because it just takes time to get things boarded and unboarded and boarded at the new place. So if I were to do that, I would try to keep my loans at the where they are now, to keep cash flow, unless I'm buying strictly non-performing. And often if you're buying pools and non-performing, particularly seconds, you're not going to house them at a servicer, because you don't want to pay the $15 or $25 a month to have them just sit there if you're working them out on your own. And that's the other. What are you doing? Are you a passive investor, or are you trying to make yourself a new career?
That's either roll up your own sleeves, or an army of attorneys.
Yeah. What else did I look up? I was thinking about things we should be looking for.
A couple of the resources, Steve. What would you say are the best resources if I'm dealing with an entity or just someone, digitally by email or by phone, and I don't know them from Adam, and I would need to make sure they are legitimate, reputable?
I opened up Bigger Pockets. I typed in Scott Carson because it's a name that everybody knows. I didn't see a page for him right at the beginning, but I came down here and I saw Chad Carson, who trades under the acronym he trades as Coach Carson, and he seems to do some good stuff. So you look for somebody who's been on the forums for a little while. Um, everybody who's doing podcasts is, typically, not everybody, typically selling something. I like bigger pockets because you can get in and you can see forum posts. You can see if they know what they're talking about. They sometimes they'll have their own blogs. I think we've got up a couple of things. Kind of day trading in the marketplace, I think is probably a good place. You can look here. You can also look to see what's going on in the world on loan MLS and in other forums. But if you're gonna go vet somebody, I started the Secretary of State for that state, and so I went in and I put modern asset management, and it's been registered since 2007. And click here, and it says what the registration address is, what the entity address is, the mailing address, amendments, and all kinds of records that you can go take a look at. So it's we're just a standard little corporation, but what you see here is that we've been around a little while. Not as
12
old.
years. I see also, in addition to a business address, I see another address, which is potentially a home address, and that says that someone's not trying to hide, and hasn't been trying to hide for 12 years. That's, and they've maintained the entity status, so they know how to stay on top of paperwork. Okay, that's like, the basics.
Well, and in fact, that's the house. And why would, oh my goodness, why would I put that in public records? I first did that with the first company in 1989. And if somebody's going to sue me, I want to know about it right away. I'm not going to hide. I want to know right away. I don't want a bad service, resulting in a defaulted judgment. But that was the business I was in. I was running a collection agency, and I sued people, and every now and then they'd sue me back. And that was part of the game. That was part of the business. There's another service called TLO. And so this is, again, if you're passive, you probably, and doing a handful of things, you probably don't have access to this. The TLO is a public record database owned by TransUnion. And if you can get to this, you can get a fairly decent picture of what's going on with somebody. You can see movement from address to address. You can get phone number verification, which is really accurate. They include in this basic report whether there's indicators, there's bankruptcies, there's a lien. That's a bad sign. Utilities is primarily now cell phone data, and you get some verification of prior history addresses, and that's, if you can't go off and get a full-on credit report, then and you shouldn't be pulling credit reports on business partners anyway. It's one place to get a look. I would think our Better Business Bureau page is really small, if there is anything.
Yeah, I was thinking there's some other websites that offer access to TLO for the TLO level of information for the average person. I can't, maybe like peoplefinder.com or some. There's some resources out there that basically give you the window into what TLO would provide.
Yeah, and it is, I'm showing my age, but it is astonishing what you can Google on people. It just is. We have no idea how hard this used to be. I do have a Better Business Bureau page, and it shows right here that yes, in fact, there was a government action from the Department of Business site of oversight to us. We had a complaint. We had a complaint about a year ago, and it was resolved. And so there it is. It pops right up.
It was a small issue for being in such bold red font, but look at the B plus.
It's a government recording, and it probably dropped me to a B plus. Okay, sure.
One complaint in the last 3 years.
Yeah, and so there we go. I wonder what it was. I've never even looked. Complaint details unavailable. We answered it. Okay. I wonder who answered. So maybe
I think that was me.
Was it you? Oh, okay. I'd hate the whole Yelp thing. When you skip trace folks on the loan side, Facebook is a marvelous place to go. You can't spoof people and pretend to be their friend, but if they're listing anything in public, you can get a sense of what they're like. And there's things we sure shouldn't put up on Facebook if we're trying to be credible in the business world. But people do. So,
How about using a third party or escrow service or some kind of custodian in a note sale? Is that common in larger trades?
Let's see. I think it's not Iron Mountain. There's some services that do act as escrow custodians. I've never done anything near the size where I thought I needed that. Again, I think those you're looking at verification of chain of title. When you go looking for bad news, so I've looked at the Secretary of State page. You go to the local county when you identify where your partner is, and you go look at the county court records and see if there's any judgments there. We often find DUIs and from the past and stuff pops up. I've seen evictions on people that we were thinking about doing business with and probably did. A lot of bad stuff happened in 2008-9, and people lost homes, and so there's foreclosures. Particularly if you were a high-flying real estate guy and person in 2006 and 7, when everything came crashing down and you were over-levered, you probably ruined your credit score for a while, and you probably lost some houses, and cost some banks some money. I popped open I have a TransUnion report sitting here just because I just happened to have one open. I was looking at a borrower before we got on the phone. So you need permission to do that. You need permission to pull a credit report. Good old-fashioned reference checks. Who were your last trades with? Again, trying to weed out people that are trying to pass themselves off as subject matter experts and they just finished taking a training class. The idea of taking somebody else's money to start a business just terrifies me. We talk about that all the time. We're both all in the business we're running right now, and that's just simply, I think, the way it should be.
So there's a story behind at least one of maybe the pages you just were showing about a business loan that was done through the company, and the business had produced hundreds of thousands of dollars in income over the prior years, and the business was easily worth a couple $100,000 with the continued operations in place. And the combined package of assets that the business owned, the business was an auto repair shop, so they had lifts, they had tools, they had things that amassed to security when all combined. But can you really go in, take all of these things? If you do, what is the liquidated value of them? Are you really secured? And what is the value of your security? It's tough to answer, I think.
Mm-hmm. So I want to try to bring us to close here, so you can get some questions in. I've been in business for a long time, and I still don't have a really good instinct on who should I trust and who should I not. And what that does is it's made me really focus on making my circle smaller and smaller. And and if I only buy notes through one broker, that's probably okay. That's probably okay. I don't need to be in the business of vetting all the note brokers in the space. Uh,
We've referred to it also as ensuring we're always climbing the food chain.
mhm. Yeah, yeah. And you and I both spent a lot of time in very old paper, and have moved up to prime lending paper ourselves, at the point now.
Right.
And there's been, and I think you find that would you say that the smaller the transactions, the more there's folks out there trying to get over. I think the
Oh,
bigger people.
absolutely, absolutely. The that goes with there's sophistication at a higher level of volume, um, being able to move, more than one loan. That's a note that they're going to Xerox and send you copies of. They'll you'll get your due diligence package in the mail on Tuesday. Um, I I would say, how do you even know that this is legitimate? Or if they ask you to send money to a personal account, or an account that doesn't match the entity name on your purchase and sale agreement, red flag again. One of the things, going back to the seller survey, that I wanted to add was, if you have your seller attesting to this information up front, there's no reason they shouldn't stand behind it at time of close. So putting in your reps and warrants in the contract, Exhibit A, the seller survey was true and correct to their knowledge that they filled out. That stands in the contract. So if you
Mhm.
ever had an event of dispute with your seller, you could always go back to that seller survey.
No, and absolutely, including that in the contract, is here's the things that you told me.
Mm-hmm.
It takes out all the he said, she said stuff. And when you're new or when you're old, you still don't know how things are going to turn out when something goes bad. So the idea of planning for the worst is again something we've been trying to reinforce. It's like, what would happen, if the performing notes stopped performing? What would happen if the recession hit? What would happen? All the things that we've lived through that I tend to gloss over. Um, the person who's asking for my money doesn't have my best interest at heart. So that's probably it. But except some people do, but just not everybody. Yeah. And so, all right. So I'm gonna stop this here, and Nick's gonna take Q&A. Is that right?
Yeah, you bet. Great.
All right. Okay. All right. Thanks.